The dust was more than just dust. It was a fine talcum powder grit that got everywhere, in your teeth, your eyes, the action of your rifle. Sergeant Ava Rostova wiped a grimy sleeve across her mouth, the gritty texture a constant, annoying companion in the Afghan valley. She ran her hands over the contents of her aid bag for what felt like the 100th time. Compressed gauze, check. Tourniquet, check. Chest seals, check. It was a ritual, a nervous tick born from the understanding that the weight of the kit on her hip was the weight of her squad mates' lives. The radio on her shoulder crackled to life, a burst of static-filled words. All elements, be advised. Intel paints the picture clear. Village is green. Proceed with standard presence patrol. The words were meant to be reassuring, but they settled in Ava's gut like a cold stone. She looked at the mud brick compounds clinging to the hillside, their windows dark and vacant like empty eye sockets. It was too quiet. The only sound was the scuff of their own boots on the rocky path and the low, anxious breathing of the man next to her. Her mind, betraying her, flashed to a world away, to her little brother, Alexei, his face beaming with pride at her graduation photo. She saw the small, cluttered kitchen of their home, smelled her mother's cooking, heard the familiar, safe sounds of a city that never slept. She had made a promise to Alexei, a foolish, heartfelt promise whispered the night before she shipped out. "I'll be back before you know it. I'm a medic, not a frontline grunt. It'll be safe." She had believed it then. Now, in the oppressive silence of the valley, the promise felt fragile, a soap bubble ready to pop. Her eyes scanned the squad. They were spread out, moving with the cautious, fluid rhythm of trained infantry. Then she saw Corporal Lena Flores. Lena was a study in focused intensity. Her posture was ramrod straight, her head on a swivel, her eyes constantly scanning the high ground, the rooftops, the alleys between compounds. She moved with a quiet, economical grace that spoke of countless hours on the range and in simulated drills. Ava knew her story, the broad strokes anyway. Daughter of a Cold War pilot, legacy enlistment. She wasn't here for a paycheck. She was here out of a deep, almost hereditary sense of duty. It was in the way she carried herself, in the quiet respect the younger soldiers showed her. Lena was their rock, their steady center. The first shot was not a single distinct crack. It was the sudden, violent ripping of the very fabric of the air. It was followed an instant later by the unmistakable whoosh of an RPG, and then the world dissolved into a chaos of noise and fear. "Contact front! Contact front!" The yell was swallowed by the storm of incoming fire. Dirt and rock shards erupted around them. Eva dropped behind a low, crumbling wall, her heart hammering against her ribs. Training took over. She saw Private Miller go down, clutching his leg, a dark bloom already spreading through his fatigues. She low-crawled to him, the world narrowing to the man, the wound, and her bag. "You're okay, Miller. Look at me, you're okay?" Her voice was surprisingly calm, a forced steadiness that belied the terror screaming in her own mind. She slapped a tourniquet high on his thigh, cranking the windlass until the bleeding stopped. His pained cries were muffled by the deafening roar of the firefight. And then cutting through the chaos, she heard it. The disciplined, controlled, 3-round bursts of an M4 from an exposed position further up the trail. It was Lena. She had pushed forward, using a rocky outcrop as makeshift cover, laying down suppressing fire to keep the enemy's heads down while the rest of the squad tried to regroup. She was a magnet, drawing the enemy's fire, creating a pocket of safety for her team. Eva felt a surge of admiration and fear. "Stay put!" She yelled at Miller, and then she was moving again, a low, fast sprint towards the sound of Lena's rifle. Bullets snapped past her, kicking up puffs of dust at her heels. She slid in behind the outcrop, her lungs burning. Lena didn't even glance at her. "Miller?" she asked, her voice tight as she ejected a magazine and slammed a fresh one home with practiced efficiency. "Stable," Eva gasped. "But you're exposed here. We need to pull back to the compound wall." Lena just shook her head, her cheek welded to the stock of her rifle. "Negative. They try to flank. I'm the only one with the angle." She fired another burst. "I can hold them." It was in that moment, as Ava prepared to argue, that the world exploded. The sound was different this time, closer, more personal. The RPG hit the forward side of their rocky cover. The concussion was a physical blow, a hammer of pressure and sound that stole the air from Eva's lungs. She was thrown back, her head ringing. Disoriented, she blinked, pushing herself up. And then she saw Lena. She was lying on her back, her rifle a foot away. Her face was a mask of shock and pain. And there, on the side of her torso, just below her body armor, a dark, wet stain was rapidly spreading across the dusty fabric of her uniform. The world snapped into a terrifying, hyper-focused clarity. The roar of the firefight, the screams, the dust, it all faded into a dull background hum. Eva's universe shrank to the space between her and Lena's body, to the dark, glistening stain that was growing with every beat of Lena's heart. "Lena!" she yelled, her voice raw, scrambling forward on hands and knees. Her training screamed at her, a checklist running on a frantic loop in her mind. Airway, breathing, circulation, massive hemorrhage. She rolled Lena onto her side, a quick, assessing movement. No exit wound. The shrapnel was still inside. "I'm here, Lena. I've got you," she said, her voice forcing a calm she didn't feel. She ripped open her aid bag, her fingers closing around the familiar package of combat gauze. With a practiced tear of her teeth, she had it open. She pulled up Lena's body armor and uniform, exposing the wound. It was a jagged, ugly tear, welling with dark blood. She packed the gauze into it with firm, direct pressure, her hands quickly becoming slick and red. Lena gasped, her eyes flying open. They were wide with shock and pain, but a fierce, defiant light still burned deep within them. "Eva, they're moving left," she choked out, her words bubbling slightly. "The Wadi, they're using the dry riverbed to flank Miller's position." She tried to lift her head, her body tensing with the effort. "Don't you move," Eva commanded, her voice sharp with a medic's authority. She kept one hand pressed hard on the wound, the other reaching for a roll of tape to secure the bandage. "The Medevac is inbound. You hear that? The bird is coming. You just have to hold on." The distant, rhythmic thrum of helicopter blades was the most beautiful sound she had ever heard, a promise of salvation cutting through the hellish noise of the battle. Lena's head fell back, but her hand scrabbled weakly at the dirt, her fingers searching. They found the pistol grip of her M4. With a groan that was pure agony, she dragged the weapon toward her. "No," Eva said, her voice dropping to a desperate plea. "Lena, no. You're going to bleed out. You have to lie still." "They'll be cut to pieces," Lena whispered, her eyes fixed on some distant point, her mind clearly tracking the tactical situation even as her body was failing. "The LZ? It's exposed. That machine gun? It has the perfect angle." She gritted her teeth, a fresh wave of pain washing over her. "Help me up, just prop me up." Eva stared at her, torn between her duty as a medic and the unthinkable request. To move her was to risk killing her. To deny her was to risk the Medevac and the rest of the squad. She looked into Lena's eyes and saw no fear, only a cold, hard determination. This was not a plea. It was an order from a soldier who knew the battlefield better than anyone. In that moment, Eva understood. Lena wasn't just trying to be a hero. She was doing her job. She was the squad's automatic rifleman, and she was the only one who could complete this final, vital mission. Making the hardest decision of her life, Eva let go of the tape. She braced her own body behind Lena's shoulders, carefully lifting her torso just enough. She grabbed a fresh magazine from Lena's webbing and slapped it into the rifle. Lena's hands, trembling but resolute, found their familiar places on the weapon. She chambered around, the sound a sharp metallic click of finality. The effort cost her. She cried out, her face turning a ghastly shade of gray, but the rifle stayed shouldered. Eva keyed her radio, her voice steady now, a soldier's voice. "All elements, be advised. Corporal Flores has visual on enemy movement in the Wadi, attempting to flank. She is engaging," I say again. Flores is engaging. "Suppress that machine gun nest! Cover the LZ!" She then turned back to Lena, her hands returning to the bandage, applying pressure once more. She was a medic and a spotter now, a shield for the sword. "Okay, Lena," she said, her mouth close to Lena's ear. "I'm right here. Talk to me. Where are they?" Lena's eyes, glazed but focused, stared down the rifle's sights. She took a shallow, ragged breath. 4 of them. carrying an RPK. 100 meters. In the wadi, she squeezed the trigger. The rifle barked, its recoil jarring through her wounded body. Ava felt the jolt and pressed down harder on the gauze, watching as a fresh bloom of red seeped through the fabric. The crack of the rifle shot was a physical blow to Lena's body. A sharp, searing agony ripped through her abdomen, so intense she saw stars dancing at the edge of her vision. For a terrifying second, the world went gray and silent. She fought to draw a breath, but it was like trying to inhale fire. Her grip on the rifle weakened, the heavy polymer stock feeling like a block of lead. I can't, she gasped. The words a wet, desperate whisper. Eva's voice cut through the haze, firm and impossibly close. Yes, you can. Breathe, Lena! Just breathe through it. Look at me. Ava kept one hand planted firmly on the bandage, the other gripping Lena's shoulder, anchoring her to the world. The squad is moving because of you. Miller is safe. You hit one of them. They've gone to ground. You did that. She was lying, but it was a necessary lie. The enemy was still moving, but Lena needed to hear a victory. Any victory. Lena focused on Eva's voice, using it as a lifeline. She thought of her father, a man of few words but unwavering resolve. He had flown missions in the shadow of the Iron Curtain, his hand steady on the stick while others might have faltered. A Flores doesn't quit, he had told her once, his voice quiet but firm. Not when people are counting on you. She could almost smell the old leather of his flight jacket, feel the cool metal of the model B-52 he kept on his desk. That memory was a shot of pure adrenaline. She forced air into her lungs, a ragged, determined inhale. Her finger found the trigger guard again. Okay, she breathed, her voice a little stronger. Okay, I see them. They're pushing again. The one with the RPK is behind the big rock. The one with the white streak. She adjusted her aim, a minute movement that sent fresh waves of nausea through her. The world in her rifle sights was a narrow, wavering tunnel. She blocked out everything else, the pain, the fear, the metallic taste of blood in her mouth. There was only the sight picture and the enemy. She exhaled slowly, a shooter's breath, and squeezed the trigger. Another controlled burst. The rifle kicked against her shoulder and she cried out, a short, sharp sound of pure torment. Eva flinched, her own body tensing in sympathy. Good shot, Lena. You made him keep his head down. She could see the strain was becoming unbearable. Lena's skin was clammy and pale, a sheen of cold sweat covering her face. The bleeding was not stopping. The bandage was saturated, a deep, ominous red. The thrum of the Medevac helicopter was louder now, a pounding rhythm that shook the very air. It was a race against time, a brutal calculus of blood loss versus covering fire. Lena, the bird is on final approach, Eva said, her voice urgent. You've done it. You've held them. It's time to go. She prepared to pull Lena back, to ready her for the stretcher that would carry her to safety. Lena's head shook, a weak but stubborn motion. No, not yet. Her eyes were fixed downrange, wide with a frantic intensity. The gunner, he's repositioning. He's going to have a clean shot at the Chinook's ramp. She could see it in her mind's eye, a horrifyingly clear image of the helicopter flaring for landing, its broadside exposed, and the enemy machine gunner finding his mark. It would be a slaughter. One more magazine, Eva, just one more. I can stop him. Her plea was not for her own life, but for the lives of the crew and her squad mates who would be loading her. She was buying their safety with her own blood, second by agonizing second. She reached a trembling, blood-smeared hand toward her webbing, fumbling for another magazine. Ava stared at her, her heart breaking, and slowly, with a medic's hands that were meant to heal and not enable a suicide, she handed Lena the last full magazine. The fresh magazine felt impossibly heavy in Lena's hand. Her fingers, slick with a mixture of her own blood and grime, fumbled against the cold metal. The simple, practiced motion of ejecting the old magazine and seating the new one was now a Herculean task. Each tiny movement sent jagged bolts of lightning through her core. She could feel the warmth of the blood soaking through the bandage, a relentless, creeping tide. Ava's hands were back on her, applying pressure, a constant grounding presence in the swirling vortex of pain. You're almost out of time, Lena. Eva whispered, her voice tight with a fear she could no longer fully conceal. "The bird is 30 seconds out." Lena just gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. Her world had shrunk to the circle of her rifle scope. The enemy machine gunner was her entire universe. He was a blur of motion behind a pile of rocks about 200 meters away, trying to wrestle the bipod of his heavy machine gun into a new, more advantageous position. He was the key. If he got that gun operational, the Medevac would be a sitting duck. The downdraft from the approaching Chinook was now whipping up a stinging cloud of dust and debris, reducing visibility and making the shot even more difficult. Lena blinked against the grit, her eyes burning. She regulated her breathing, or tried to. Each inhale was a shallow, painful sip of air. She blocked out the thunderous roar of the helicopter, the frantic shouts of her squad mates as they prepared the landing zone, the frantic beating of her own heart. There was only the crosshair and the target. She calculated the wind, the dust, the slight uphill angle. Her father's voice was in her head, not from a memory of war, but from a childhood spent on a rifle range. "Steady, Lena. Squeeze, don't pull. Be surprised by the break." She took up the slack in the trigger. The pain was a living thing now, a beast clawing at her from the inside, demanding she give up, lie down, and let the darkness take her. She ignored it. She focused everything she had, every last shred of her will, into the tip of her finger. She exhaled halfway and held it. The sight picture wavered, then steadied. She applied the final, steady pressure. The shot broke clean. Through the scope, she saw the machine gunner stagger and fall, his weapon clattering uselessly against the rocks. A wave of immediate, overwhelming relief washed over her, so powerful it felt like a physical force. The tension that had been holding her together simply vanished. Her arms went limp. The rifle slid from her grasp and clattered onto the rocky ground. Her head lolled back against Ava's shoulder, her eyes staring blankly at the pale blue Afghan sky. The last thing she was aware of was Ava's voice, shouting right in her ear, "He's down! He's down! You got him, Lena! You did it!" And then the world went soft and gray and very, very quiet. The sounds of the battle, the roar of the helicopter, Ava's voice, it all faded into a distant, muffled hum. There was no more pain, only a profound, all-consuming exhaustion. She felt hands, many hands, lifting her, the rough canvas of a stretcher against her back. She was moving, floating it seemed, toward the thundering noise. Then she felt nothing at all. The inside of the Medevac Chinook was a world of controlled chaos, a stark contrast to the dusty, sun-scorched hell they had just left. The moment the stretcher was locked into place, the helicopter banked sharply, climbing away from the valley. The noise was overwhelming, a deafening thrum of rotors and turbines that vibrated through the metal floor and into Eva's bones. The crew chief, a sergeant with a face etched with grim experience, moved with a practiced urgency, hooking Lena up to a field monitor. The steady electronic beep of a heartbeat was the most beautiful sound Eva had ever heard. "She's crashing!" The crew chief yelled over the roar, his eyes fixed on the monitor. The beeping had become rapid and irregular. "BP is in the toilet. We need to get a line in now." Eva didn't need to be told. Her training kicked back in, sharper and more focused than ever. The battlefield was gone. This was her operating room. She ripped open a plastic package with her teeth, pulling out an IV catheter. Lena's veins were collapsed, hidden beneath pale, clammy skin. Eva tied a rubber tourniquet around her arm, tapping the skin, searching for a hint of blue. "Come on, Lena, give me something," she whispered, her voice lost in the engine's scream. She found a faint line at the crook of the elbow. Wiping the skin with an alcohol swab, she guided the needle in, a flash of blood in the chamber. Success. She secured the line and held the bag of saline high, watching the fluid begin to flow into her friend's body, a fight against the devastating loss of blood. She worked in tandem with the crew chief, a silent, efficient dance. She cut away Lena's bloody uniform, exposing the wound fully to assess the damage while the chief prepared a unit of O-negative blood. The bandage she had applied was soaked through, a crimson mess. As she peeled it away to replace it with a fresh trauma dressing, she saw the true extent of the injury, the ragged tear made by the hot metal. Her stomach clenched, but her hands remained steady. This was no longer about tactics or covering fire. This was about raw medical science fighting against the body's failure. She packed a new hemostatic gauze into the wound, applying direct pressure once more, as if she could physically will the life to stay inside Lena's body. The flight felt like an eternity, each second marked by the frantic beeping of the monitor. Ava never took her eyes off Lena's face. It was ghostly pale, peaceful in a way that was terrifying. She kept one hand on the bandage, the other on Lena's wrist, feeling for the thready, weak pulse. She talked to her, a constant low monologue, unsure if Lena could hear her but needing to do it anyway. "You're going to be okay. You're the toughest person I know. You saved everyone back there. Your dad is going to be so proud. Just hold on. We're almost there." She thought of the promise she had made to her brother, a promise to come home safe. In that moment, she made a new, silent promise to Lena. She would not let her go. She would fight this battle with her until the very end. A change in the engine's pitch signaled their descent. The crew chief gave her a thumbs up. 2 minutes. The surgical team is standing by. Ava looked down at Lena. A trickle of blood had escaped from the corner of her mouth. Ava wiped it away with a clean corner of a bandage, her touch gentle. The helicopter flared and then settled with a jarring thud onto the landing pad at the Roll 3 hospital. The rear ramp hissed down, flooding the dim cabin with blinding sunlight. A team of doctors and nurses in scrubs swarmed inside, their voices sharp and clear. "GSW abdomen, massive blood loss, 1 unit of O-neg en route, BP 70 over palp." Eva rattled off the handover report as they swiftly transferred Lena from the helicopter stretcher to a hospital gurney. In seconds, they were rushing her away, the gurney wheels clattering on the concrete, the doctors already calling out orders. And just like that, Lena was gone, swallowed by the sterile, bright interior of the hospital. Ava stood alone on the ramp, her hands, her arms, her uniform covered in drying, flaking blood. The sudden silence was deafening. The fight was over. For now. The silence was the first shock. After the relentless roar of the Chinook, the relative quiet of the combat hospital hangar was a physical pressure on Ava's eardrums. The second shock was the cold. A dry, air-conditioned chill seeped through her sweat-soaked and blood-caked uniform, raising goosebumps on her arms. She stood frozen on the ramp, watching the swinging double doors where Lena's gurney had disappeared. The adrenaline that had been a fire in her veins for the last hour abruptly vanished, leaving her feeling hollowed out and brittle. Her hands began to tremble, a fine, uncontrollable shaking she tried to hide by clenching them into fists. The coppery smell of blood was everywhere, a sickening perfume that clung to her. A corpsman approached her, his face kind but weary. "Sergeant, you need to get checked out." She just shook her head, her voice a dry croak. "It's not my blood." He nodded understandingly. "Come on, let's at least get you some water and a place to sit down." He led her to a makeshift waiting area, a row of green plastic chairs against a cinder block wall. She sank into one, the plastic groaning under her weight. Someone pressed a bottle of cold water into her hand. She stared at it, unable to process the simple act of unscrewing the cap. All she could see was the image of Lena, pale and broken, sliding off her rifle. All she could hear was the wet, ragged sound of her breathing. Time lost all meaning. She sat there, staring at the scuff marks on the floor, replaying every second of the ambush. Had she packed the gauze correctly? Should she have forced Lena onto the stretcher the moment she'd reached her? Was handing her that last magazine an act of loyalty or a death sentence? The questions circled in her mind like vultures, each one picking at her resolve. She looked at her hands, now clean from a quick wipe with a sanitizer cloth. But she could still feel the sticky warmth of Lena's blood, the terrifying give of the wounded flesh beneath her fingers. She was a medic. Her job was to save lives, to ease suffering. Yet, she had aided in an act that had undoubtedly caused her friend unimaginable pain. The moral conflict was a knot in her chest, tight and painful. Hours later, the sound of bootsteps made her look up. It was Captain Jansen, their company commander. His uniform was dusty, his face etched with a deep exhaustion that went beyond physical fatigue. He pulled up a chair and sat facing her, his elbows on his knees. "Rostova," he began, his voice low and gravelly. He looked at the blood staining her uniform, a map of the horror she had endured. "The surgeons are still working. It's touch and go. They've had to remove her spleen, part of her intestine. She's lost a tremendous amount of blood." He paused, letting the gravity of the words sink in. Then he looked her directly in the eye. "But they said the field care she received, they said it was the only reason she was still alive when she hit the operating table. You kept her in the fight, Sergeant, and in doing so, you saved every man on that bird. Flores took out that machine gunner. The pilot confirmed it. He saw the body. That shot. It was a 1-in-a-million shot for a healthy shooter, let alone—" He trailed off, shaking his head in a kind of awed disbelief. Eva absorbed his words, but they didn't immediately penetrate the shell of her guilt. She just nodded slowly. The captain stood up, placing a firm hand on her shoulder. "You both displayed a level of courage and self-sacrifice I have rarely seen. Get some rest, Sergeant. That's an order." He walked away, leaving her alone with her thoughts. The shaking in her hands had finally stopped. She looked down at them again, these tools of her trade. They had been used to patch a wound and to feed a weapon. They had been instruments of both healing and war. She thought of Lena's unwavering determination, her absolute focus on the safety of others. She hadn't been a medic enabling a suicide. She had been a soldier supporting a hero. The knot in her chest began to loosen, just a little. She finally unscrewed the cap from the water bottle and took a long, slow drink. The fight for Lena's life wasn't over. It had just moved from the dusty valley to a sterile operating room. And Eva's job now was to wait and to hope. The waiting was a different kind of battle, a war fought in the silent, sterile corridors of the hospital against an enemy called uncertainty. Eva finally forced herself to move, to shower, the hot water sluicing away the dried dust and blood, but doing nothing to cleanse the memory of it. She changed into a clean uniform, the fabric feeling alien against her skin. She tried to eat something in the chow hall, pushing the food around her plate, the smells making her nauseous. Every time a door hissed open or a phone rang, her heart leaped into her throat. She found a quiet corner in the troop medical clinic and must have dozed off, because the next thing she knew, a gentle hand was shaking her shoulder. It was one of the nurses from the ICU, a woman with kind eyes and a tired smile. "She's out of surgery, Sergeant. She's critical, but she's stable. She made it through." The relief that washed over Eva was so profound it left her weak. She followed the nurse to the intensive care unit, a place of hushed voices and the steady, rhythmic beeping of monitors. Lena looked small and impossibly fragile in the hospital bed, a stark contrast to the fierce warrior on the rocks. A web of tubes and wires connected her to the machines that were now breathing for her, feeding her, and monitoring every flicker of her vital signs. Her skin was pale, almost translucent under the bright lights. Eva pulled a chair close to the bed, the screech of its legs on the floor unnaturally loud. She sat down, unsure of what to do, what to say. She just watched the slow, mechanical rise and fall of Lena's chest, a motion dictated by a machine, but a motion nonetheless. She was alive. Days bled into one another. Eva spent every spare moment in that chair. She talked to Lena, her voice a low, steady murmur. She talked about home, about stupid things that had happened in training, about the guys in the squad and how they all asked about her. She read the get-well-soon cards that started to arrive from the unit aloud, her voice catching on the words of praise and gratitude. She held Lena's limp, cool hand, careful of the IV line. The doctors were cautiously optimistic. The damage had been catastrophic, but Lena's youth and her incredible physical fitness were on her side. The real question, they said, was neurological. The body had suffered immense trauma and blood loss. It was a waiting game. It was on the 4th day that Eva saw it. A flicker. A slight, almost imperceptible twitch of Lena's index finger against her palm. Eva froze, her breath catching in her throat. She leaned forward. "Lena, can you hear me?" "It's Eva. Squeeze my hand if you can hear me." She waited. Her entire world narrowed to the point of contact between their hands. For a long moment, there was nothing. Then a weak but definite pressure. The squeeze was faint, a ghost of a movement, but it was there. It was intentional. A tear escaped and traced a clean path down Eva's dusty cheek. She hadn't realized she was crying. "That's it," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "That's it, Lena. You're in the hospital. You're safe. You made it. Just rest now. I'm right here." The following day, Lena's eyes fluttered open. They were hazy, clouded with drugs and confusion, but they were open. They focused slowly on Eva's face. There was no recognition at first, just a blank, weary stare. Then a spark, a tiny light of understanding in the deep brown depths. Her lips, chapped and dry, moved silently. Eva leaned closer, her ear almost to Lena's mouth. The sound was a dry, rasping whisper, barely audible over the hiss of the ventilator. Did they get away? Eva felt a sob well up in her chest, a mix of laughter and tears, of all the questions, of all the things to ask. She squeezed Lena's hand gently. Everyone got away, Lena, because of you. Everyone is safe. A profound sense of peace settled over Lena's features. Her eyes closed again, but this time it was a restful sleep, not an unconscious retreat. The corner of her mouth turned up in the faintest hint of a smile. The battle was finally over. The long road of recovery was just beginning, but the will to walk it was there, burning once again in the heart of a soldier. The air in the Pentagon Hall was cool and still, smelling of old wood, floor polish, and quiet significance. It was a world away from the choking dust and cordite of the Shawicot Valley. Lena Flores stood at attention, her back straight, her posture perfect, despite the deep, aching twinge the movement sent through her reconstructed abdomen. The dress blue uniform felt stiff and formal, a stark contrast to the worn, comfortable weight of her combat fatigues. She kept her eyes fixed forward, on the American flag standing proudly in the corner of the room. The gentle rustle of the audience, a collection of high-ranking officers, family, and a few carefully selected members of the press, was a soft murmur in the vast echoing space. Beside her, also standing at a perfect parade rest, was Sergeant Eva Rostova. Eva's own uniform was immaculate, a testament to the pride she felt in this moment for her friend. Her hands, the same hands that had once been slick with Lena's blood, were steady at her sides. She could feel the weight of the occasion, the history in the room. She glanced sideways at Lena's profile, seeing not the pale, broken soldier from the hospital bed, but the resolute, determined woman who had refused to quit. The memory of those days was a permanent part of her. But the sharp edges of the trauma had been softened by time and by the sight of Lena's recovery. A four-star general stepped up to the podium, his voice resonating with authority and a touch of unmistakable reverence. He spoke of the battle, of the ambush, of a squad pinned down and outnumbered. He described the valor under fire, the selfless actions of a medic who braved enemy fire to reach a fallen comrade. Then his tone shifted, becoming more specific, more awestruck. And then, the general said, his voice dropping slightly, facing a wound that would have incapacitated any soldier, Corporal Flores made a decision that defies all military logic and all human instinct. She refused medical evacuation. She assessed the tactical situation with a clarity that still astounds her commanders. And from a stretcher, while a combat medic fought to keep her alive, she engaged the enemy. He paused, letting the image settle in the minds of everyone present. With precise, disciplined fire, she single-handedly suppressed an enemy flanking maneuver and eliminated a machine gun nest that threatened the Medevac helicopter and the lives of every soldier on the ground. Her actions were not born of recklessness, but of a profound and calculated courage, a willingness to trade her own life for the lives of her brothers and sisters in arms. The general picked up a small, dark box from the aide next to him. He turned to Lena. Corporal Lena M. Flores, for conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity in action at the risk of your life above and beyond the call of duty, I am proud to present you with the Silver Star. He moved to pin the medal to her uniform. But Lena, with a slight, respectful shake of her head, stopped him. Sir, she said, her voice clear and firm, carrying through the silent hall. With all due respect, this medal does not belong only to me. She turned slightly, her eyes finding Eva's. She reached out, her hand closing around Eva's wrist, and gently pulled her forward to stand beside her. Sergeant Rostova's hands were the reason I lived long enough to fire my weapon. Her courage was my courage. This honor is as much hers as it is mine. A wave of soft, approving murmurs swept through the room. The general, a faint, understanding smile on his lips, nodded. He unpinned the medal, And, in a gesture that would be captured in a photograph that would later grace military publications, he held it between them, a symbolic bridge connecting the two soldiers. Ava felt a lump form in her throat, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. This was not about a piece of metal and ribbon. It was about recognition of a bond that few could ever understand. It was about the unbreakable link between the shield and the sword, between the one who fights to save and the one who fights to protect. As they stood there together, facing the flashing cameras, they were not just a medic and a rifleman. They were a testament to the fact that the highest form of heroism is not found in solitary acts of glory, but in the unwavering will to stand together, to endure together, and to bring each other home.